The crew gathered at Rod's request, but many were absent. Vukovac was still recovering in the sickbay, as was Obiedros. The two of them had begun to bond in their shared time in the recovery room, apparently having an affinity for a lower technology lifestyle than everyone else was accustomed to. Rhea checked in on them frequently, ensuring they were recovering as expected. Both were on the mend, and as they approached the end of their treatment plans, Rhea and the crew opted to use some of their medical supplies to help speed their recovery along. Nuck hadn't come out of his room after their most recent victory. While he was never one for post-battle celebrations, for him to be so absent struck some as odd. Rod, more than anyone else, gave his friend space, but after a few days, his concern began to grow. Rod was torn between concern for his secreted friend and the opportunity to exploit the information from Coralie's datapad. Rod went by Nuck's room a few times to check on his friend, but each time, Nuck had waved him off. Sometimes, in their long shared history, Nuck had been like this. Secretive, solitary. Rod assumed to be just one of the many quirks of the engineer species. And even though his concern and curiosity were strong, he knew to give Nuck space. The crew gathered. They had to take action with the datapad, and that meant completing a visit to the bank. Rod arranged a meeting with one of the bank employees, and then collected the crew to prepare to travel back into the city. Kasiwa was late to the meeting. As she strode into the dining room, she held a datapad in her hand, and she was absently making broad swipes, as if fling-scrolling through a list. She arrived at her chair and sat without looking at the seat, still focused on her scrolling for many moments. "Busy?" Rod asked. Kasiwa hesitated, looked up, then shook herself free of the mesmerizing list and put the datapad down. No, sorry, it's just... there's no bounty jobs. I'm surprised by that. I've been on the bounty network for almost 4 years. I've never seen the list empty. Means y'all are doing a good job, doesn't it? I mean, yesterday there were thousands of jobs. Today, none. Maybe it's a bad connection? It's not a bad connection. I just got off a call with the bank and I've used the Calmu mapping network many times this morning. Connection's fine. What else could it be if you tried turning it off and on again? Kasiwa absently nodded, then shook her head again. You know what, it's probably nothing. I'll check in once we're done at the bank. Rod, Kasiwa, Obiedros, and Nuck went into the city. Rhea remained behind on the Unremarkable with Vukovac. While he'd recovered, Rod wasn't inclined to include the Feral in their financial planning, and he had asked Rhea to ensure that Vukovac was indeed fully recovered. Part of that was making sure that the Feral was combat ready, but the desire to keep the Feral at arm's distance was the greater driver. The quartet shared a lunch, then went into town. The Unremarkable was almost paid off, so they spent their day shopping for supplies. It was almost time to find a new planet, and Lennel, as a patron, was eager to give them work on nearby star systems. Rod's focus had been split between Coralie's secret data pad and Nuck's privacy, but with Nuck out of his room now, Rod's ability to wait had shrunk to almost nothing. He was jittery, like an eager child en route to an amusement park. They found themselves seated in the bank lobby. Innocuous adult synth pop piped through the room, which was littered with inoffensive warm colors and digital advertisements for banking services. Rod nervously tapped the data pad on his thigh, anxious energy building up from an anticipation of what the reward from the benefactor might be. He let himself daydream about enough credits to buy a new ship, or a fleet of ships, or a chalet atop a snowy peak, or a simple 14-bedroom cantina on the edge of a crystal blue lake. Obiedros helped himself to fistfuls of complimentary candy. Nuck said nothing, staring forward, lost in thoughts of his own. Even Cassie was preoccupied by the absence of work she'd discovered earlier on the Bounty Network, and she continued to mull over reasons for the absence. Where Rod had been eagerly awaiting this meeting at the bank, Kasiwa was eagerly awaiting getting back to the Unremarkable so that she could investigate the cause for the blank bounty list. "Mr. Foster?" a woman said. One of the tellers motioned Rod forward. Rod stood and was fully caught in the financial fantasy of his impending windfall. He joined the teller in her office. Meanwhile, Kasiwa sighed and looked out the window. Her eyes scanned the horizon, the cityscape, a backdrop that stretched out for miles beyond them. Outer Kalmu was a tall city, most of it a porcupine's back of smokestacks and exhaust flumes stretching into the sky, all of it stained, filthy brown, even here in the city. Her eyes caught a glimmer, a reflection in the distance, the sun bouncing off a reflective surface in a city where reflections were so rare. She focused her gaze, narrowing her eyes, but could only make out one of the broadest details. There was someone on a rooftop, watching them in the bank. Her heart skipped a beat. She let her training, her skills at bounty hunting, take control of her senses. Nervous eyes darted back down to street level. If that was a watcher on high, it was someone on oversight. Were there others at street level? Sure enough, amongst the crowds and cars of the downtown core, she caught sight of shady figures, hats pulled low and collars pulled high, 3 of them surrounding the bank. They were hunting the crew, circling them, snaring them, and they were waiting for the crew to come out of the bank. Attacking them in the bank would be suicide for everybody. The security here would be tighter than anywhere else in the city, but if they waited, they could catch them. "Call the captain," Kasiwa said to Nuck before standing, placing her hands on her shotgun under her coat and making her way casually for the door. "Tell him the meeting is over." "Why?" Nuck responded, nonetheless standing up and placing his own hand on his weapon. Kasiwa didn't look away from the streets. She instead focused her attention on the men surrounding the bank. She watched as one of them drew up a datapad, looked at the screen, and then looked square at Kasiwa. They shared a glare through the laser-proof glass of the bank's door. "Because I know why there's no jobs on the bounty network now," she said, and the realization of their situation washed over her. "Bounties can't take contracts. Someone put a bounty out on me." Rhea and Vukovac were too far back to immediately join the crew. With the jump on the enemy, the crew took cover. Nuck and Obiedros dashed forward. The bounty hunter charged around the corner, unleashing his shotgun on an unsuspecting Nuck. His shot missed. The rest of the enforcers set up to flank the crew. Kasiwa stepped out from behind a shop and fired at an enforcer. She missed. Rod stepped into the alley and leveled his beam pistol. He vaporized the specialist. Fearful of the crew, one of the enforcers flees. aimed his pistol and fired at the bounty hunter, but missed. The bounty hunter retaliated, hitting Nuck. Nuck quickly used a stim patch to stay in the fight, and was lucky to have done so. Kasiwa charges forward aggressively and fired her shotgun at the second enforcer. He too is shredded by the blast. Rod charges for the object in the center of the city. Obiedros advanced in front of Nuck and fired, but the bounty hunter avoided the shot. Kasiwa could see no enemies on her side of the city block, but she could hear the continuing sounds of battle. She fled, intending to circle around, but becomes lost along the way. Nuck fired his pistol again, hitting the bounty hunter. The hunter survived yet again, resilient. The bounty hunter continued to exchange fire with Obiedros, hitting him and wounding him. In retaliation, Obiedros fired his rifle, hitting the bounty hunter and finally felling him. Kasiwa slipped back around and charged toward the lead hunter. The hunter was crawling backwards, body badly damaged, barely able to crawl. In the distance, the klaxons of approaching authorities put a timer on the crew's escape. Kasiwa grabbed at the lead hunter's jacket and threw it open to expose the wounds he had suffered. Trauma to the chest, internal bleeding, bad burns. He wasn't going to survive. She sighed, still frantic, but disappointed. No one wanted this to be how the hunt ended. And even though Kasiwa had been the target of the bounty, she didn't want him to die this way. She didn't want any bounty hunter to die while on the job. "How do you know the bounty was on you?" Rod asked quickly. "Bounty network went dark, meant my clearance had been wiped. I saw the spotter on Overwatch on a rooftop and 3 thugs surrounding the bank. They weren't willing to come in, they thought they could catch us by surprise. It all makes sense, not assassins because they could have shot us on our way in. They followed us here." "Why?" Obiedros asked. "They wanted to see where we were going," Rod filled in, catching up on Kasiwa's observations. "Ask him who put the bounty on us before he dies." Kasiwa shook her head as she began to pad down the bounty hunter's coat. "He won't tell me," she said, "but we don't need to ask." At that, she pulled out his personal datapad and tossed it aside. She plucked a second burner datapad out, held it up, and then took off running down the street. The rest of the crew followed as the authorities entered the scene. Back on the Unremarkable, no one spoke. They sat, leaned, moped, and brooded. Kasiwa had been right. Someone had put a bounty out on her, and because of that, they'd taken the life of another bounty hunter. Kasiwa had only spoken briefly about the complex politics this would create amongst the guild, as it was very rare for one hunter to pursue another. Still, the question that kept everyone on edge was who? Who had hired someone to take out Kasiwa? Who had put a bounty out on her head? Was it someone from her past? Someone she had hunted before? The answer was much more close to home. Iso Lambda, Kasiwa repeated. Contract was filled in a few days ago on Iso Lambda. Client is someone named Pendleton. Who is Pendleton? Rhea asked. A fixer, it seems. He maintains a social presence that indicates he was an accountant or business advisor to a number of elites around the sector.
So he might just be the middleman working for someone else then.
Not anyone, I believe. Observe his client list. Nuck swiped the information onto the display. The hologram lit up, a slowly rotating image twisting around of a figure all too familiar to the crew.
Sydney,
Rod said through gritted teeth.
But he's dead. Why would this Pendleton fella send hunters after Kasiwa now? All this way? Couldn't have been cheap.
You are holding a datapad that shows Sydney had access to a great deal of wealth. It stands to reason we are not the only ones trying to capitalize off of Sydney and Coralie's deaths. Perhaps this Pendleton character wants the wealth for himself. Or one of these clients he works for.
Are they going to come after us again, Cass?
Contract was a failure. If someone else picks it up, they might.
So how do we stop that from happening? We can't fly around the galaxy getting chased by hunters all the time.
We need to talk to this Pendleton, get him to cancel the contract. Rod stood and looked out the window. The sights of Outer Kalmu had grown stale. People had shot at his ship. People had attacked him. They had fought their way up and down the entire city. This place was dangerous and difficult, and he'd seen enough.
Nook,
he said.
Set a course back to Iso Lambda. It's time to talk to this Pendleton fella.